Hey, here is a game which I'd like you to try and use as an example of how mathematical reasoning can help you understand situations which at first seem not obvious, whether that's a game or real life. So this is a game called the Game of Stones. The board is a number line from 0 to 40. Whole numbers, and there are 3 stones on it, hence the name of Game of Stones. The rules are very simple. 2-player game, you take it in turns, and you've got to move an outer stone to between the other 2 stones. For example, I can move this stone to there. But it's got to go on a whole number. All stones must occupy a whole number during the game. So the next person would have a turn, and they could move the yellow or this one. Let's go this one in between. And then the next person has a turn, and we could go there. And actually, there's only one move available now, which is for the red move to go into there. And that would be the end of the game because no other legal moves are available. And the person who just played that move won because the next person cannot play the game. So you win when you leave the other person unable to play. That's a Game of Stones. And if you haven't done already, try it out. Play with a friend, see if you can figure out a strategy that will help you win. And in the rest of this video, I'd like to explore how mathematical reasoning can help you get to a strategy which is quite useful to make sure you have the better chance of winning this game. Okay, I hope you've had a chance to go and play the game, and if you haven't, I really think it's worth trying before you listen to my spoilers, which I'm about to give you, which I want to show you that the mathematical reasoning behind this is maybe not the maths you think it is, but it helps you understand how the strategy will work. And I hope you realise, if you have played the game, that situations like this are exactly the same as a situation like this if they're all 5 stones to the left. So it's not really the numbers of where the stones are that matters, it's the gaps between them, which is why I've got a button here that shows me the distances between the stones. And originally when the game starts, they are 20 apart, so the 2 gaps we have are 20 and 20. And I hope that's kind of obvious. Those are the numbers that matter, not really exactly where the stones are, it's the gaps between the stones. And let me play a game again. So if I put that one there, I've now got a gap of 15 and 5. It's not obvious how that helps, but it does help, believe me, in a moment. And if I play that one there, I've got a gap of 2 and a 3. And this person has a chance to win now because they move that one in there. We have a gap of 1 and 1, and that is by definition the end of the game because nothing can be played after that. So, having said that the gaps are what's important, if I restart the game here, how do I end up with the situation where the other person has lost? Well, I've got to get the gap down to a 1 and a 1. And I'd like you to realise that they are both odd numbers. So instead of thinking about the actual numbers, think about the even or odd. In mathematics they would call it the parity. At the moment they are 20 and 20, they're both even numbers. If I choose one of these gaps, let's choose this one to split, you can see I can split it into 2 gaps. But if I'm splitting an even number, I split it into 2 even numbers or 2 odd numbers. 2 even, 2 odd. I can't do anything else because that's how even numbers work. So an even gap can split into 2 evens or 2 odds. And if we look at a different gap, let's look at an odd gap. I can split an odd gap into an even and an odd, or an odd and an even. There is no other choice because that's how odd numbers work. Even odd, odd even. That ends up being the crucial observation in this game because the losing position to find yourself in is 1-1, otherwise known as an odd and an odd, and there are only certain positions that let you even get to that position. So let's have a look at the options we have. There are actually only 3 types of gaps you can end up with. 2 evens, where both the gaps are even, 1 odd and 1 even, in either order. It doesn't really matter because you're just going to choose one to split for the next round, or both odd. So let's have a look at what could happen after those situations. If both gaps are even, then you're going to have to split an even gap, and an even gap splits into either 2 evens or 2 odds. That's the only outcome that can happen from where the gaps are both even. Notice though, you can get to the 2 odd situation, which is the losing situation because 1-1 is 2 odd gaps. So that's worth bearing in mind. Now, if you have 1 odd and 1 even gap, you can choose to split the odd gap or the even gap. So there's lots of options here. If you split the even gap, then the same things that we've just talked about could happen. But if you split the odd gap, you will guarantee that you'll leave 1 odd and 1 even gap after you've split it in either order. So that's a super flexible situation. Notice that one, though, can reach the 2 odd situation, which is the one you'd like to leave someone at the very end, a gap of 1 and 1. So crucially, the 2 odd gap, you have to split an odd gap, and the only thing you can do when you split an odd gap is leave 1 odd and 1 even gap. So that position cannot reach the 2 odd gap, which means 2 odd position will never be able to leave the opponent with a 1-1 position where they've lost. And that's all you need to know. If you leave someone with an even number in a gap, so this position or this position, they could leave you with 2 odds, and that's bad because then you can't leave them with 2 odds, which in the end is what's going to give you the win of the game. So the advice actually from this little diagram and reasoning about odds and evens is that if you never leave the opponent with an even number, they can never make you lose, which means the advice I have to say for this game is never leave an even. And if you never leave an even, you can never lose. Let's try it on a game. Let's say I'm going to be player 1. And I play first because there's an even number and I'd like to not leave that with my opposition player. So if I put it there, what I would be doing is leaving them 2 even gaps, 10 and 10, and that's against my advice of never leave an even. So I'm going to go there, and then they have a gap of 11 and 9. Now whatever they do, they're going to split the gap into an odd and an even, so they have to leave me an even, which I like about. So if they do that one, then I'm going to pick this stone, and I could leave them 2 even gaps, but remember my advice is never leave an even. So if I go there, then they have to pick the outer stone here, and they can't win. They have to leave me an even, so they have to go something like that, and then I move there and I win. If you never leave an even, you will always win a game of stones. So it does matter that you pay attention to how the game starts. If the game starts like this with even numbers as the gaps, you do want to go first, and then you can force a win. If, however, the game started like that, which doesn't look very different, then you wouldn't want to go first, because in your move first you have to leave them an even, in which case you want them to go first, so they have to leave you an even, and then you can follow your advice of never leaving them an even. The game is interesting. It's a variant of what they might call a NIM type game, N-I-M. If you want to look this up, there are literally thousands of variations of games like this, and with all subtly different rules. And even in this game, you could change the rules, which would change the strategy. For example, maybe the last person to move loses, and that would change everything. And you can have a different board size, you can have different starting positions, as I've already hinted at. The mathematical reasoning behind it of the odds and evens and their consequences is a way of investigating the strategy. I hope you enjoy playing a game of stones.